Nayeon woke up to find herself reincarnated inside a modern fantasy novel called The Academy's F-rank commander. The story follows a male lead who becomes an extra villain inside a video game world. At the Academy, he forms a team, defeats villains, and even builds a harem, just like another typical male-oriented fantasy story. Normally, Nayeon wouldn't have even glanced at a story like that. But she still remembered being forced to read it because of her friends in her past life. Of course, she had quit halfway through. Even though she now possessed plenty of knowledge about this world, she had been reborn as an orphan with no special abilities. For 16 years, she'd done nothing but fight to survive. Knowing the future had been completely useless, at least until recently. At the National Awakening Center, the receptionist instructed Nayeon to head up to the second floor to begin her awakening process. She also explained that all awakeners were required to submit their basic personal information and that Nayeon should return it to her afterward for further instructions once the procedure was done. After finishing her explanation, the receptionist asked if she had any questions. Holding the registration slip with trembling hands, she shook her head and said she didn't have any. The world Nayeon was reincarnated into was one torn apart by gates, portals that had thrown everything into chaos. In a society where morals and ethics had long since crumbled, life was far harsher than in her previous one. In that broken world, Nayeon grew up in an orphanage, a place where the weakest gathered, struggling just to make it through each day. The director sold children for money, and the caregivers took out their anger by beating the kids. It was a hell within another hell. But after meeting her current teacher, she finally escaped that nightmare. After her current teacher became the new director, the orphanage finally turned into a safe home. But lately, things had been getting tougher, funds were running out, and the director had been struggling to keep the place afloat. Nayeon didn't want her to bear that burden alone anymore. She hoped that if she awakened with a decent ability, she could start earning money herself and maybe even invest in companies she knew would skyrocket in the future. However, Nayeon's awakening turned out to be the worst possible outcome. She became a sniper, a position that required huge amounts of money and powerful connections to succeed. When she saw her pitiful stats, her heart sank. With no funds or network, she had no way to gain experience or improve her abilities. At this rate, she couldn't even dream of investing in her future. She couldn't even help the orphanage survive. After leaving the Awakening Center, Nayeon felt at least a bit relieved that her academy admission would be fully covered by the government. She knew that just because she was reincarnated didn't mean she'd get some kind of main character buff. Still, she couldn't help but hope that being a reincarnator meant something special, that maybe the world had prepared a small twist of fate just for her. At the very least, she wanted to believe that there was something out there that would let her protect the home her teacher built and the younger kids who had become her family. In front of her, a woman was hosting a broadcast announcing the start of Guardian Academy's new enrollment season, probably introducing the next generation of heroes who would protect the nation. As Nayeon watched the woman continue introducing the promising new students, a realization suddenly struck her. Maybe, just maybe, this was the moment when a reincarnator like her would finally be given a special chance. The main setting of the novel The Academy's F-rank commander was Guardian Academy, the very same place Nayeon would soon attend. She also possessed insider knowledge of the story itself. One rule of modern fantasy stories was always the same: whenever an incident happened, the protagonist would solve it and receive a reward. In this world, there were two main leads. The first was the quiet, hardworking type who just focused on doing his job, the stoic. The second was a sly opportunist who always knew how to twist situations for his own gain, basically, the scammer. The story followed the scammer protagonist, who ended up possessing the body of a minor villain, an extra meant to be defeated early in the game's storyline. Before his possession, he had been a hardcore fan of the original game, knowing every secret and hidden mechanic by heart. To make things even more unfair, he awakened a broken skill called Inside Eye, which allowed him to see everyone's stats. With that power, he easily uncovered hidden treasures known as hidden pieces, trained powerful allies, and expanded his influence across the world. As Nayeon pieced the story together in her mind, she began to regret never finishing the novel in her past life. In the story, the scammer protagonist invested heavily in his teammates, training them up only to use them later for his own gain. And if her memory was right, he had also started as the weakest student in the academy, most likely the same lowest rank as her. Even though Nayeon had no special powers and didn't get any kind of protagonist buff, she still had something valuable, the original story knowledge. She decided it was finally time to put it to use. The most important thing she remembered was that the main characters and their allies all ended up with a happy ending. So if she couldn't be the protagonist herself, the answer was simple: she'd just get close to one. Her goal was to blend in as a minor supporting ally, earn the hero's trust, and ride along on whatever investment or opportunity came her way. On the day of Guardian Academy's entrance ceremony, Nayeon boarded the school shuttle heading to the event. She already knew from the novel that the Academy's facilities were top tier, but seeing them in person was still overwhelming. As she read through the school's regulations, nothing really stood out to her, except for one thing: the dorms actually had a curfew. That confused her, because in the original story, there had been no mention of any curfew. In fact, characters had freely wandered around even in the middle of the night. A little later, Nayeon arrived in front of the auditorium where the entrance ceremony would be held. As the students began to file inside, the host instructed them to find their assigned seats by checking the signs in the front rows. The host explained that the letters on each sign represented both their current rank and the class to which they would belong. The students sitting beside them, he added, would be the companions starting this new chapter of their academy life together. Upon admission, each student was given a temporary rank based on their specs, ranging from Class D to Class F. Obviously, Nayeon ended up in the lowest of them all, Class F. After everyone had taken their seats, the host announced that the principal would now give a welcome speech and asked all students to stand. While she clapped along with everyone else, Nayeon felt a wave of discomfort. Students from the other classes were openly whispering and snickering at the F-rank group. Soon, the principal appeared and began to speak. With a warm smile, she told the new students, whom she fondly called her little chicks, to take their seats. She welcomed everyone to the academy and said she was already excited to see how they would grow. She also added that her office doors would always be open, encouraging anyone with worries or questions to visit anytime. When the principal appeared, the students couldn't help but blush at her charm and confidence. Nayeon couldn't help but wonder if even the stunning principal might secretly be one of the protagonist's future harem members. After the principal wrapped up her speech, the crowd grew even louder with excitement. The host stepped in quickly, asking everyone to settle down before announcing the next part of the ceremony. It was time for the freshman oath. The student chosen to represent the new class was a boy named Siwoo, the same stoic protagonist from the original game. At that moment, Nayeon remembered a scene from the novel where the scammer protagonist said an unbelievably cringy line. Just then, someone beside her muttered under his breath, "Bring it on, world," in the same dramatic tone. Nayeon froze. That was the line. And when she turned her head, she realized it wasn't just anyone who had said it. It was him, the scammer himself, sitting right next to her. Nayeon froze. It wasn't just the shock of having the protagonist beside her. It was the weight of his presence, sharp and impossible to ignore. Then it clicked. The reason students from other classes were whispering about Class F wasn't because of the F-rank kids at all. It was because he was there. Their attention made sense. In the original story, his character had been infamous for his bad reputation before the possession. But now, even if he wore the shell of a villain, the person inside was someone completely different. Nayeon couldn't afford to waste this chance. This was the moment she had been preparing for, the whole reason she came to the academy in the first place. A few days before entering the academy, Nayeon had been worrying about how to get along with guys her age. The only boys she'd ever been around were her cute younger brothers, so she had no real clue how to act. She'd been thinking hard about what kind of girl the protagonist liked and what personality wouldn't overlap with the other heroine-type characters from the novel. While she was lost in thought, her younger brother quietly stepped into the room. Her brother asked what she was doing, and Nayeon told him she was planning for the future, all for the orphanage. He listened with a worried look on his face, then told her not to keep sacrificing herself for them. He said she was now an awakened one and could live comfortably on her own if she chose to. Just as he clenched his fist, about to tell her to stop worrying about the orphanage, Nayeon gently took his hand and smiled. She told him that the kids and the director there were her family too. She added that they were the people she loved, so there was no way she could ever stop caring about them. Tears welled up in his eyes as he threw his arms around her. Nayeon found him adorable, like a little puppy, and gently patted his back to comfort him. Then she froze for a moment. It suddenly clicked. She had thought of a heroine type that the original story never even had. Back in the present, Nayeon made a quiet promise to herself for the sake of her adorable younger brothers. She had built a whole persona for getting close to the scammer. A warm, upbeat girl with soft, puppy-like energy. A little sunbeam who could slip past anyone's guard. Nayeon greeted him with her brightest smile. Her sudden friendliness seemed to catch the scammer off guard. She introduced herself and asked for his name. He paused for a moment, then asked if she really didn't know who he was. Of course, she did. But keeping her expression as innocent as possible, she said she didn't, and even asked if he was someone famous. The scammer's name was Yuhan. In the Awakened society, he had been infamous as a complete troublemaker, known for womanizing, a short temper, heavy drinking, and just about every scandal possible. But all of that belonged to the original Yuhan before the scammer took over his body. His reputation was mostly known among awakeners, so for a government-supported awakener like Nayeon, who came from a civilian background, it wasn't strange that she wouldn't recognize him. She asked if he was some kind of celebrity, and Yuhan shook his head before telling her his name. In this world, awakeners came from two main backgrounds. The first were those born into awakening bloodlines, families that passed the trait down and formed the core of the elite awakened society. And then there were government-supported awakeners like Nayeon, people discovered through national screenings rather than born into awakening families. She quietly told him she was one of those government-supported awakeners, admitting with a bright, awkward smile that she didn't really know anyone and was a bit worried about keeping up with the academy's pace. To him, she needed to look like nothing more than a clueless, harmless girl. Someone naive and slow on the uptake, the kind of civilian awakener who seemed easy to use. If he saw her that way, he would eventually lower his guard and start paying attention to her. She continued the conversation, asking if he knew many people here. Yuhan replied that, since he came from an awakened family, he was familiar with most of them. Nayeon looked at him with wide, sparkling eyes, saying how impressive that sounded before asking if he could already use his abilities too. At her question, he crossed his arms, gave a teasing grin, and said something vague, clearly enjoying himself. Nayeon froze for a moment. She recognized that look right away. He definitely knew more than he was letting on. After all, he had been a hardcore fan of the original game. Determined not to let this chance slip away, she resolved to stay by his side no matter what. Wearing her most radiant smile, Nayeon asked Yuhan if he could teach her how to control her powers. Her first attempt to get close to Yuhan failed despite her bright smile. The moment she asked him to teach her how to use her ability, the entrance ceremony ended. She tried to follow him through the crowd, but there were too many people, and she quickly lost sight of him. While Nayeon soon became friendly with her classmates, the scammer didn't blend in. He stood quietly in the corner, busy plotting his next move. Nayeon decided not to rush things. She would approach him when the timing felt right. After all, with his awful starting stats, Yuhan couldn't make any real moves on his own yet. And even if he wanted to reach out to the Awakened Society elites, his past reputation made that impossible for now. So she was sure of one thing: Yuhan would start by targeting Class F, the group with the least prejudice toward him. And in Class F, Nayeon happened to be one of the few range damage students. On top of that, she was the exact hidden piece he needed. On top of that, she possessed a skill essential for the route he would eventually try to clear. All she needed was a chance to show him what she could do. If that moment came, joining the protagonist's party would be the easiest thing in the world. She called out to Yuhan, wanting to help soften his reputation a little. With an easy, friendly tone, she invited him to come sit with them and chat. Her sudden call left Yuhan a little taken aback. And he wasn't the only one surprised; her friends beside her stiffened as well. Yuhan smiled and walked toward them, then introduced himself to the group. After he finished, Nayeon added with a bright tone that he came from an Awakened family background, so he probably knew a lot about the Academy and the Awakened Society. Hearing that, Yuhan told the others they could ask him anything if they were curious about something. The classmates warmed up to him right away. With how friendly he acted, a few students gathered around and began asking how to control their abilities. Yuhan responded to each question, patient and polite, as if he had all the time in the world. Watching that scene, irritation simmered inside Nayeon. When she had asked earlier, he brushed her off, but now that he had a crowd to impress, he was suddenly acting like the perfect senior. Still, if she was the one giving him the chance to clean up his reputation, then he could return the favor someday. Once the real classes began, the instructor greeted the room and announced that they would be learning how to fight and defeat monsters. One student raised her hand and said she wanted to become a researcher, not a hunter. The instructor encouraged her dream but explained that everyone still needed to learn the basics of how to handle dangerous situations. Everything was going fine until the instructor asked why humans treated monsters like enemies. The room went completely quiet. He continued, explaining that at the end of the day, their job was still to end a living creature. Monsters had intelligence too, so in theory, they might even be capable of forming bonds. He asked if any of them had ever considered that possibility. The students started whispering nervously, unsure if a teacher was even supposed to talk like that. To them, monsters were obviously something you killed, nothing more. Seeing their reactions, the instructor explained his point. Most monsters acted with a clear goal of wiping out humanity, so treating them as enemies was the only real answer. That was the conclusion he had come to. He told the students that he hoped each of them would find their own answer someday, then wrapped up the class. Nayeon thought about the instructor's words as she headed toward her assigned dorm room. Yuhan had a clear path laid out for him since he knew the main storyline and all the routes from the original game. He had a goal. But she didn't. Because the things that truly mattered to her were completely different. Nayeon opened the door to the dorm room she would be living in from now on. The moment she stepped inside, she was shocked by how nice an F-rank room actually was. Thinking about it made her recall the kids back at the orphanage. They had always wished for a room of their own. She imagined how happy they would be if they could move into a place even half as big as this. Then the instructor's earlier question suddenly came back to her. For Nayeon, the only thing that truly mattered was her family, and what her family needed most right now was money. If earning money meant hunting monsters, she was ready to do it. And if it required more than that, she would handle it too. That was her answer. Nayeon decided it was time to make a proper plan, so she opened her status system. Looking over her stats, she sighed. They were still miserable, nowhere near the scammer's level, not even close. She told herself she'd just have to level up and raise them one step at a time. But right as she was setting that goal, a new window suddenly popped up in front of her. The system message showed a single message, system update in progress, 99%. Once it hit 100%, several new screens appeared one after another. The final pop-up congratulated her, stating that she had successfully become part of Yuhan's storyline. Another status window appeared, stating that Nayeon was now officially a character within the novel The Academy's F-rank commander. Another window followed, explaining that she was both a character and a reader of the story, and that other readers' reactions had been updated. Then it presented her with a choice, asking if she wanted to check the meta system. Nayeon realized this must be the reincarnator's buff she had been hoping for. The surprise left her speechless for a moment. In front of her, a new explanation for the meta system appeared. It stated that regular characters couldn't see the system, and that Nayeon would earn meta points based on how often she appeared in the story and how important her role became. It also explained that she would earn meta points based on how readers reacted to her character and how much interest she received. With those meta points, she could enhance herself in various ways. It showed that she currently had 11 meta points. This system hadn't existed when she awakened, so if it suddenly appeared after an update, she figured some kind of event must have happened without her noticing. Earlier, it had clearly stated that she was now part of the scammer's story, so the update was probably triggered the moment the reincarnator met the protagonist. Wanting to know what she could do with these points, Nayeon opened the meta points shop. New status windows popped up in front of her in an instant. The status window explained that meta points could be used to buy various special items, and their prices changed depending on story consistency and how difficult they were to obtain. A long list of items appeared along with their point costs. From strange things like story twists to weapons, potions, and even stat upgrades, the selection was so wild that Nayeon couldn't help but stare in shock. But she didn't have many points, so she decided to buy something she could afford right away. She purchased a basic magic pistol, and the moment she confirmed the purchase, an actual pistol appeared in her hand. Nayeon was amazed. She could really buy items from the shop with her points. She took a breath to settle her excitement and decided to save the rest of her points for later. After that, she opened the appearance part section. The status window explained that this showed the parts of the story where Nayeon appeared, and that her parts would continue to update over time. It also stated that she could view both the latest chapter of the novel and all past chapters as well. Right then, the original novel's content from the scammer's point of view appeared in front of her. Being able to see how he viewed her and how she looked from an objective angle felt like a real advantage. The story began at the moment Siwoo recited the freshman oath in front of all the students. In his mind, Yuhan was determined to survive no matter what, using every bit of knowledge he had as a veteran of the original game. Because of the body's bad reputation before his possession, the students around him were already giving him wary looks. He was trying to figure out how to turn that reputation around when someone beside him suddenly called out to him. When he turned his head, a girl was smiling brightly at him as she greeted him. Her sudden friendliness caught him completely off guard. She asked for his name and introduced herself as Nayeon. He was surprised that she genuinely didn't seem to know who he was. She explained that she was a government-supported awakener, so she didn't really know anyone here and felt a bit out of place. Hearing that, he realized it made sense she didn't recognize him. And more importantly, he couldn't help thinking she might be an easy piece to use, someone who knew nothing about the awakened world. Just as he expected, the way Class F looked at him was completely different from the other classes. Since many of them were government-supported awakeners, their reactions leaned more toward curiosity than hostility. While answering the flood of questions from his classmates, Yuhan used his insight eye to check their status screens one by one. As expected, the stats in Class F were all low, but that didn't mean there weren't any useful students. For example, Nayeon, a sniper, would definitely benefit from weapon-based bonuses. He figured she might be helpful when he eventually tackled that dungeon. Her skills were clairvoyance, sure shot, and mana bullet, all of them impressive abilities despite her low stats. On top of that, she seemed to have a good impression of him. He decided to keep an eye on her a little longer before pulling her into his team. He thought his early plans were going to move along more easily than expected. Since he still needed to build a connection with the main protagonist, he decided to head to the training rooms right after class. Room 7, in particular, was on his list. While he was planning his next steps, Nayeon suddenly asked if he had any siblings. He must have drifted into thoughts about family without realizing it, because her question hit a little too close. Her unexpected question made him let out a bitter smile. He told her he did have a younger sister, but their relationship was terrible. In the original game, he had been the older brother of one of the Heroine characters, yet the two of them were on terrible terms, and that detail alone left him with an unpleasant feeling. Meanwhile, Nayeon, who read the whole story, felt annoyed. The novel didn't even bother to mention how she'd helped clean up his reputation, yet here he was already acting gloomy about his own backstory. Because of her Sunshine Act, she had only been polite to him, yet he somehow took it as her having a crush on him. That thought irritated her so much that she lightly punched the status window out of frustration. Still, she eased herself back into focus. At the very least, he recognized her usefulness, and that was what mattered most. And even if reading his thoughts and plans in the appearance part made her angry at times, she had to admit it would be incredibly useful from now on. Nayeon moved on to check the readers' reactions. Many readers assumed she was one of the scammer's future harem members, pointing out that the protagonist needed a sniper for an upcoming dungeon and guessing she would be the perfect fit. Some even predicted that she had hidden talent and that the protagonist would eventually help her awaken properly. But mixed in with all those comments were a few nasty readers saying she should be killed off before she even had the chance to become a heroine. Seeing those comments made Nayeon flare up, and she smacked the status window in frustration. Still, the meta system made one thing clear. This world was being shown to someone else as if it were a novel. And when she checked her points, she confirmed that the 11 she earned came from her appearance in episode 5. What worried her, though, was the fact that the stat points she would gain from leveling up were completely random. When she leveled up, she might gain just 1 point, or 10, or she could keep getting a single point over and over until one day it suddenly jumped to 100. But the bigger problem was that the distribution of those points was also random. In other words, even though she was a sniper, all her points could easily end up thrown into strength, the one stat she had no use for at all. Because of that, meta points were far more valuable than regular stat points. They allowed her to choose exactly which abilities to improve. For an Awakener, that was an incredible advantage. So if she wanted to earn more meta points, she needed to satisfy the reader's expectations and draw out positive reactions from them. With that in mind, Nayeon decided she would start catering to the reader's expectations. Judging from the earlier comments, readers clearly showed more interest in heroine-type characters than in ordinary party members. After learning how meta points worked, her original plan stayed the same. She would get close to the scammer, build the right connections, secure the investment she needed, and eventually stand on her own. But her target role changed. No more aiming for a convenient extra at the party. Now, her goal was to become a heroine. From now on, her goal was to become one of the heroines of this story and collect as many meta points as possible. To do that, she needed to get close not only to Yuhan but also to the other key characters who appeared in the main storyline. Since the upcoming events would eventually lead toward world-ending disasters, befriending the heroes who would stop them didn't seem like a bad idea at all. After finishing unpacking, Nayeon remembered that there was an event on the first day where the main characters appeared. She also recalled from the novel that the scammer had headed to the training rooms earlier. In the original game, Siwoo often used training room 7, so that was probably his. That meant the scammer would most likely choose one of the remaining rooms, either 6 or 8. With that in mind, Nayeon decided to head to the training area and check things out. A little while later, Nayeon arrived at the training rooms. Since it was the first day of school, the whole area felt unusually quiet. She figured she would make a reservation and wait her turn. But just as she was about to do that, she heard the scammer's voice nearby, speaking to someone who definitely wasn't Siwoo. The girl standing next to the scammer asked why he was here. He shot the question right back at her, asking if there was a problem, then casually added that he was also a student of Guardian Academy. With a shameless look on his face, he asked her what was so strange about a student being in the training room. Nayeon immediately recognized the girl beside him. It was Yuri, one of the main heroines from the game. This situation matched the conflict event between the protagonist and Yuri that appeared in the novel. Yuri believed he had shown up just to mess with her. But the scammer gave a sly grin, almost as if he wanted to provoke her on purpose, and said he was only here to train. Nayeon knew he was lying. His real reason for coming to the training room was to find Siwoo. Yuri didn't believe a single word he said, and Yuhan kept insisting that he had only come to train. Watching the two argue, Nayeon suddenly remembered the scene. His annoying lines made it clear what he was trying to do. He wanted to get Yuri angry on purpose so that the righteous Siwoo would show up and save her by coincidence. Yuri argued back, saying she was sure he was just slacking off. Nayeon silently agreed with her. But he acted offended, pretending it was unfair that she didn't believe him. Even from a distance, Nayeon thought he looked unbelievably annoying. His shameless reaction pushed Yuri over the edge. She shouted at him to stop lying and said she knew he was up to something shady again. She told him to get out immediately, insisting that someone like him had no right to be here. In that moment, Nayeon couldn't say she liked him, but she did feel a small spark of gratitude toward the scammer for creating such a perfect opening. While the two kept arguing, she quietly stepped between them. Nayeon stepped between them with a practiced look of sadness, blocking Yuri just as she looked ready to lash out at Yuhan. She told Yuri that she had been listening for a while, and it sounded like Yuri's words were a bit too harsh. She said it firmly, without wavering. Both of them flinched at Nayeon's sudden appearance. Yuri immediately demanded to know why she was defending someone as awful as him. Nayeon already knew Yuri was the proud, sharp-tongued noble lady type and that she was Yuhan's twin sister. But she didn't know the full story between them yet, so she decided to play clueless for now. In response to her question, Nayeon said Yuhan was simply a classmate. She didn't know what kind of history Yuri had with him, but she firmly added that he wasn't the kind of asshole Yuri made him out to be. Nayeon thought to herself that he wasn't exactly a total jerk, since he eventually invested in the people around him. She kept arguing back, saying every academy student had the right to use the training rooms freely. Yuri replied that this only applied when someone was using it for a legitimate purpose. She explained that the training rooms existed for training, nothing else. Yuhan answered in an annoying tone that he was here to train. Nayeon, standing beside him, privately agreed with Yuri, but she had no choice but to back him up. Yuri told her she couldn't believe Nayeon actually trusted his lies. Nayeon felt unfairly accused of taking Yuhan's side, even though she didn't want to. She told Yuri it wasn't right to assume everything Yuhan said was a lie, no matter what he said. Yuri let out a cold laugh and said Nayeon clearly knew nothing about him. But Nayeon answered with confidence. She said that even if his first impression seemed a little cold, once you actually talked to him, he smiled easily, acted kindly, and never judged anyone by their background. She added that he was the kind of guy who shared what he knew and tried to work hard with everyone. Seeing how highly Nayeon thought of him, Yuri let out a worried sigh. She muttered that Nayeon was pitifully being played by him. Yuhan asked if it ever crossed her mind that he might have actually changed, but Yuri shut him down with a cold order to be quiet. Yuri grabbed both of Nayeon's hands and muttered in a sharp, angry voice that it wasn't enough for Yuhan to treat the training room like his personal playground. Now he was messing with another innocent person all over again. Her sudden intensity startled Nayeon, and for a moment, it felt like sparks were practically shooting from Yuri's eyes. She then added that their mother had forgiven all of Yuhan's past actions by expelling him from the family and giving him a fresh start. Then Nayeon realized the sparks had actually been flickering up Yuri's hands. She had no idea why Yuri was this furious, and she was certain that in the original story, Yuri had never lost her temper this badly. The flames around her had kept growing because of her skill, and just before she stormed out, she had been a moment away from attacking Yuhan while shouting that he hadn't changed at all. At that moment, someone grabbed Yuri's arm and told her to stop. It was Siwoo. He reminded her of the school rule that banned the use of offensive skills without permission except during approved situations like dealing with an unregistered dungeon, using the training rooms properly, or attending classes meant for ability training. Yuri's face flushed at his words. She yanked her arm free, said she knew the rules perfectly well, and stormed out of the room. Once Yuri was gone, Nayeon admitted to herself that she really did have a fiery temper. Even so, she felt relieved. This was the moment where Siwoo stepped in to keep things from getting out of hand, just like in the original story. Standing beside her, the scammer thanked Siwoo for stepping in and said he owed him for that. He even held out his hand. Siwoo told him not to worry about it, explaining that he only stopped Yuri because he didn't want to get warned for standing by and doing nothing. But whether he didn't notice the gesture or simply ignored it, he never took Yuhan's hand. Nayeon felt that Siwoo's sense of justice really showed through. He had stepped in because he was worried a fired-up Yuri might actually hurt Yuhan. Even then, he didn't boast or act proud about it. He really was just a straightforward, pure person. At Nayeon's compliment, Siwoo blushed and mumbled that it was nothing. Seeing that, Nayeon and the scammer exchanged a glance. A moment later, they both started praising him non-stop, calling him the brave guy of their generation, the perfect academy role model, and even someone who could end up as a future hunter celebrity. Siwoo flinched at their praise and turned shy, his ears turning red. With their compliments piling on non-stop, he quickly reached out to cover their mouths and begged them to stop. Nayeon found it funny how shy Siwoo became when he was praised, and the softened atmosphere made it feel easier to talk with him. She felt they could grow closer pretty quickly. She then asked if he was also on his way to train. Siwoo nodded and said he had sensed a flow of mana coming from inside the training room. Their conversation was interrupted when Yuhan suddenly jumped in, asking Siwoo if he had really sensed that mana flow. He pointed out that even hunters struggled with that kind of detection. Yuhan then asked if the spell that cleared the fire earlier had also been one of Siwoo's skills. Siwoo shook his head and said it was just a basic technique anyone could use once they got used to handling mana. Siwoo talked like it was nothing, but Yuhan pointed out that it was actually a pretty difficult skill. When they tried to compliment him again, Siwoo cut them off right away, telling them to stop. Watching him, Nayeon couldn't help thinking he really was the unbothered genius type who didn't even realize how gifted he was. Siwoo said he'd catch them later, and Nayeon waved with a bright smile, telling him she enjoyed talking with him. She had no idea what his explanation about mana sensing meant, but at least she didn't have to worry about her appearance for this chapter. Beside her, the scammer glanced over and asked what had brought her to the training area in the first place. So she answered that she was here to train, of course. And to keep up her heroine act for the sake of earning points, she added a small pout and asked if she really looked like the kind of student who would slack off on the very first day. Yuhan stiffened at her reaction, clearly unsure how to deal with it. Nayeon realized this act was harder than she expected and wished he would hurry up and say something. He finally explained that he hadn't meant it that way. Most students spent the first day taking it easy, so he was only curious why she came straight here to train. She put on a slightly hurt expression and pointed out that he came here also. Yuhan admitted that it was true. Nayeon expected him to be suspicious. This event was supposed to involve only Siwoo and Yuri, yet she had suddenly stepped into the middle of it. From his point of view, the story he knew had just shifted, so it was natural for him to question her intentions. So if she wanted to stay close to him, build connections, and secure her appearance count, she couldn't afford to make him suspicious of her from the very start. She had already prepared an answer for this exact situation. Nayeon admitted that she hadn't planned on coming to the training room on the first day either. But she said her mind changed because of him. Yuhan looked surprised at her unexpected answer. She went on, explaining that seeing him help their classmates earlier made her want to push forward too, instead of staying where she was. So she figured the only thing she could do right now was come here and train. Nayeon figured that saying his presence had pushed her forward would make sense to him. If his existence had acted as a variable, even the scammer would accept that explanation. And since he already seemed partly convinced, she decided to seal the deal. She reminded herself that she could do this. The path of a heroine was long and rough, but she had to push through it. She smiled softly and said it was all thanks to him. She added that he was probably in the training room for the same reason, trying to push himself forward, and she praised him, saying it was genuinely admirable. Looking a little shy, she said she didn't know what history he had with that girl earlier, but she trusted him. Her words brought a small smile to Yuhan's face. Keeping her tone bright, Nayeon said they should do their best together tomorrow. She stayed cheerful in front of him, and in the back of her mind, she told the orphanage director that even though her facial muscles were begging for mercy, she was doing her best. On the morning of the fourth day, the assistant instructor announced that until midterms, the students would go through a series of classes designed to give them the basic knowledge and hands-on experience needed to become hunters. He explained that during the midterm exam, they would be tested against real monsters in a live combat assessment. Their performance would determine a new set of class rankings from A to F. He reminded them that the current D, E, and F classes were only temporary placements for now. Before dismissing them, he encouraged everyone to show strong growth by the time the exam arrived. Nayeon's life at the academy had already reached the fourth day. Thanks to what happened in the training room on the first day, she ended up exchanging contact information with both the scammer and Siwoo. And because of Yuhan's suggestion, the three of them had been doing personal training sessions together for the past 3 days. During one of those sessions, Nayeon and Yuhan watched Siwoo train on his own. His movement was sharp and disciplined, and the muscles in his back stood out clearly with every strike. Both of them told him he looked impressive, even praising how well his back was built. Siwoo grew flustered at their compliments and didn't say a word, his expression stiff with embarrassment. Yuhan turned to Nayeon and said he had seen her practicing earlier. His voice was surprisingly sincere as he told her she looked pretty good out there. Her eyes widened a little. She asked if he had really watched her shoot and said she had been practicing since yesterday. It felt like she was finally starting to get the hang of it, and she said so with a light, bright smile. He told her she did well, and Nayeon thanked him with the same cheerful expression. On the inside, though, she let out a dry laugh. Of course, he was pleased. She would be useful for clearing that dungeon soon enough. She was satisfied as well. Winning Yuhan over as someone useful had worked out far faster than she expected, and on top of that, she had even become friends with Siwoo. Honestly, becoming his friend alone would have been a victory by itself. Nayeon felt proud of herself for going to the training room on the very first day. It had paid off in every way. But for some reason, ever since the training room incident, she kept sensing Yuri's gaze on her. And it wasn't subtle at all. Yuri was staring openly, the kind of look anyone would notice. Nayeon couldn't understand why. Of all people, why was Yuri following her instead of keeping an eye on Yuhan? The assistant instructor told the students that they would now begin testing their weapon aptitude, along with a short practical assessment. He instructed them to head to the armory up front and choose whatever weapon they wanted to use. Watching the unsure E and F class students hesitate in front of the weapon racks, Nayeon couldn't help thinking that no matter the world, whether her past life or this one, people never really escaped the weight of their background. Nayeon figured that if it weren't for the meta system, she would have been just as unsure as everyone else. At least the academy balanced things out by giving them basic, low-tier weapons for class. That alone made the whole situation a lot easier. Nayeon was about to choose a sniper rifle when Yuhan's voice came from beside her, telling her the weapon on the left would suit her better. His sudden appearance made her jump. He added that since her class gave her bonuses for any firearm, she should try using one with a shorter frame for today's drills. It would be easier to handle while they were still practicing basics. Wanting to know what he was plotting this time, Nayeon opened her status window and tapped on the appearance part section. Nayeon picked up the weapon the scammer recommended and then asked if he had decided on his own gear yet. He answered with an easy course and opened his inventory to show her what he had prepared. To her surprise, there was only a single starter item he could actually use for his class. The weapon aptitude test was the first practical exam every rookie hunter took at the academy. All they had to do was figure out which equipment suited them best and show how well they could use it against simulated monsters, the virtual targets created for the test. It was considered one of the easiest hands-on classes, designed to help beginners get comfortable. There were 3 roles in this class, and the first was the dealer, a position where you had to hit a set damage score on the target within the time limit. After Siwa finished his test, Yuhan shouted that it looked incredible. The sudden praise made Siwa stumble for a moment. Yuhan didn't stop there, saying it was exactly what you'd expect from the main character and marveling at how strong his stats already were. His skill, Heaven's Armory, was especially overpowered. It let him use any weapon with smooth, effortless precision, almost as if it responded directly to his touch. The old sword strapped to his back also made Yuhan wonder when he would finally get to see Siwa draw it. Then it was Yuri's turn. As she walked toward the training area, she shot a sharp glare upward at Yuhan, who was waiting on the platform above. Nayeon told him she'd see him later and headed down to the training area. A fully trained sniper could dominate the battlefield, but getting to that point was tough. Raising one required a lot of time, money, and patience, which was why only veteran players ever chose the class. In this world, successful snipers were extremely rare. Nayeon wasn't worried, though. She figured that if Yuhan planned to raise her anyway, none of those problems would apply to her. Yuri suddenly appeared beside him and demanded to know what he was thinking. With clear frustration, she asked if he didn't feel even a little guilty toward Nayeon. Yuhan looked confused and said he wasn't sure what she meant. Yuri shot back, her voice rising as she asked how he could not know. The sudden intensity made Yuhan flinch. She pushed forward, saying she hadn't forgotten what he had done to that girl. Yuhan froze at the sound of it. Yuri kept pressing him, insisting there was no way he had truly changed. She asked if he planned to treat someone like a toy again and toss them aside in the end. Yuhan stood there, completely thrown off, wondering what the original him had done before he reincarnated. And even with everything so tangled between him and Yuri, he still wanted to find a way to fix it. Yuri had been firing non-stop at the targets in front of her, and for a moment, Yuhan wondered if she actually imagined those targets were him. The students watching were amazed by her performance, though a few whispered among themselves, wondering if the training room could even be repaired after what she had put it through. Seeing her aggressive, overwhelming attacks, Yuhan had a grim thought. If he tried to make up with her now, she might kill him before he even had the chance. Once the long wave of dealer tests finally ended, the next round began. First were the tank candidates, who had to endure incoming attacks from the targets, and after that came the supporters, the group Yuhan belonged to. After the dealer tests were finished, the next group stepped up. First came the tankers, who had to withstand the target's damage, and after them were the supporters, the group Yuhan belonged to. The assistant instructor explained that the supporter test also involved facing a simulated monster. The only difference was that this one wasn't an attacking type but a stationary target. All they needed to do was weaken or strengthen the target to show how well they could use their support abilities. Yuhan thought the setup looked kind of boring. He raised his hand and asked the assistant instructor if they could change the way the test was evaluated. The instructor asked why he wanted the rules changed, and Yuhan explained that his class, Commander, was built around leading people, not fighting monsters. He needed something that would make a stronger impression, especially with the ones watching from above. The Commander class was a support role built for strategy. They created battle plans, directed hunters, and turned fights in their favor. In a world where damage dealers were considered everything, commanders had a low reputation simply because they weren't on the front lines. But they were the only ones who could read the flow of a battle instantly, guide the entire team, and shift the tide on their own. When Nayeon asked what weapon he used, Yuhan lifted his worn flag. To a newcomer, it might have looked like nothing more than an old, tattered banner. But it was far from ordinary. When Nayeon asked what weapon he planned to use, Yuhan showed her his flag. To a newbie, it probably looked like nothing more than an old piece of cloth, but it was anything but ordinary. He explained that the flag he chose was designed specifically for issuing commands. Since the purpose of this test was to figure out their weapon aptitude, he suggested using the flag to lead a team and spar against other students instead. He also pointed out that using a stationary target wouldn't show the real effectiveness of his equipment at all. Hearing his explanation, the assistant instructor let out a surprised laugh, saying he had never seen a student make such a specific request. In the end, he approved Yuhan's proposal. The instructor announced that the test would be changed to a sparring format to better match the nature of the commander class. He added that their opponent should be a tank and asked if any students wanted to volunteer. Several tank position students immediately raised their hands, each one confidently volunteering. Their enthusiasm made the instructor blink in surprise, and he joked that Yuhan seemed pretty popular today. When Yuhan asked if he could choose his own opponent, the instructor agreed. Yuhan looked over the group, then pointed at the big student with blue hair. The blue-haired student laughed and asked if he was really sure about that. Yuhan answered that bigger targets were always easier to hit, leaving the guy momentarily speechless. Yuhan told the instructor he had made his choice, smiling as he did. The instructor then asked if he had any teammates, and advised that if he didn't, he should pick someone from Class D like his sparring opponent. But Yuhan said he already had someone in mind for his team. He pointed to Nayeon, the classmate standing in the same row as him. His choice made both Saiwoo and Yuri whip their heads around in surprise. In Yuhan's mind, the idea was perfect. Pairing up the underdog sniper of F-class with an overlooked commander like himself, then taking down a powerhouse student from Class D, would make their victory hit so much harder. It would be dramatic, unexpected, and unforgettable, exactly the kind of impact he wanted. Yuhan believed it would leave a much stronger impression if an overlooked strategist and a late-blooming sniper from Class F defeated a fearsome Class D opponent together. The contrast alone would make the victory unforgettable. As soon as Yuhan announced his team choice, the students erupted into whispers. Everyone said he had lost his mind for sending 2 F-class students against someone from D-class. Yuhan, Nayeon, and the blue-haired opponent stepped onto the training platform. Nayeon shifted nervously and asked Yuhan if he was really sure about this, reminding him that their opponent was from D-class. Yuhan actually found it amusing. No one seemed to realize he might have chosen the opponent precisely because he was from D-class. And watching Nayeon worry about him without understanding any of that made her look so sincerely concerned that he reached out and gave her a gentle pat on the head. Leaving a slightly flushed Nayeon behind, Yuhan stepped forward to face the blue-haired student. The blue-haired student quickly noticed that Yuhan's attention seemed elsewhere. His expression twisted with anger as he snapped at him, demanding to know why he was spacing out. He yelled that Yuhan must be looking down on him and that he wouldn't let it slide, then charged straight at him. The blue-haired student swung a fist at Yuhan, but his footing slipped, and the punch ended up hitting the air instead. If that hit had actually landed, the match would have ended right there. With how flimsy Yuhan's body looked, even one clean punch would have taken him out immediately. But that was only if he got hit. Yuhan smirked and told the blue-haired guy he was slow. That only made the guy angrier. He shouted that Yuhan had just gotten lucky and charged at him again. Yuhan let out a short laugh. From what he checked earlier, the blue-haired student's agility stat was the same low F-class tier as his own. But because the guy was weighed down by heavy defensive gear, his movements were just a little slower than usual. And that tiny difference was more than enough for Yuhan to win. After all, thanks to his insight skill, he already knew exactly where and how the blue-haired student would move. After a few moments, Yuhan slipped past each strike with sharp, effortless movements, and the blue-haired student eventually collapsed to his knees, exhausted. He panted hard and demanded to know how Yuhan kept dodging his attacks so easily. Yuhan asked if he was finally done swinging. Hearing that, the blue-haired student grew even more furious and charged at him again with far more aggression than before. While the blue-haired student was completely focused on Yuhan, Nayeon raised her gun from behind him and fired. Even as a government-sponsored awakener, her shot landed cleaner than he expected. Yuhan realized she had far more talent with firearms than her stats suggested. The hit made the blue-haired guy snap his head toward Yuhan with a furious glare. A heartbeat later, the muscles along his arms tightened and his expression twisted. He activated his skill, Berserk, without the slightest hesitation. If either Yuhan or Nayeon had charged in alone, they wouldn't have been able to leave so much as a scratch on him. But with Nayeon's gun proficiency and the natural accuracy boost her class gave her, plus Yuhan's buff skills stacked on top, Yuhan was confident they could take the blue-haired tank down. Just as the blue-haired student activated his skill and charged at Yuhan, the instructor suddenly stepped in and stopped the match. He raised his voice and told them that this was more than enough to evaluate a commander. The interruption froze the momentum instantly, and the tension in the training room eased as the instructor called the spar to an end. Nayeon knew Yuhan had planned this from the start when he kindly helped her pick a weapon. Still, she wished he could have at least warned her ahead of time. And another thought slipped in. In the original story, Yuhan's partner for this test was supposed to be Siwoo, so Nayeon had never stepped into the scene. Which made her wonder what on earth he was trusting her with. Why leave the finishing blow to her of all people? Unless, maybe this version of Yuhan really did have the instincts of a gambler. When Yuhan's eyes suddenly met hers, Nayeon caught herself and brightened up right away. This wasn't the moment to drift off. She hurried over and gave him a quick, excited hug. With a cheerful smile, she told him they had actually beaten the D-class student and said it was all thanks to him. When she hugged him out of nowhere, Yuhan went stiff for a moment. His whole body tensed, and Nayeon could literally hear how loud his heartbeat had gotten. For a moment, she wondered if he always reacted this strongly to physical contact with girls. And if that was the case, she had no idea how he managed to casually pat her on the head earlier like it was nothing. Wanting to see him panic a little more, Nayeon tightened her arms around him, hugging him even closer. Beside them, the instructor watched the scene with an awkward look before clearing his throat. He told them that it was nice they were getting along, but other students still needed to take the test, so they should head back down now. And then both Nayeon and the scammer suddenly realized they were standing in front of an entire crowd of students. They froze on the spot. A wave of teasing rose from the spectators, everyone joking that the two of them looked great together and calling them the hopeful couple of Class F. Nayeon felt her face heat up. Teasing Yuhan had been fun for a moment, but she could tell she had gone way overboard. She regretted it the second the words started flying around. After the spar, Nayeon knew she had earned a lot of points thanks to the scammer, yet a wave of self-loathing still hit her. Even so, the reader comments on her appearance in the test battle weren't bad at all, so she forced herself to look on the bright side. For the amount of embarrassment she paid, the payoff was decent enough. Now it was finally time for her to read the original novel chapters where she appeared. She didn't want to do it at all, squeezing her eyes shut in dread. But since she had no choice, she decided to skim through and only look at the parts she really needed. In the original story, on the day of the Academy entrance ceremony, the scammer had gone to the training room to build a connection with Saiwoo, the game's protagonist. But at some point, someone who was never supposed to appear in the original game, an extra named Nayeon, suddenly showed up in front of him. And right in the middle of his conflict with Yuri, she was taking his side. After reincarnating as the game's designated villain, Yuhan had spent every day under hostile stares. No one trusted him, and no one ever stepped in for him. That is, until Nayeon appeared. Her appearance was unexpected, completely outside the original storyline, but her unwavering trust in him changed everything. Because of her, he managed to get closer to Siwoo, and the whole event played out in a way that satisfied him more than he expected. In the end, he cleared the quest with results comfortably within what he had hoped for. But because of Nayeon, the original story had shifted. Yuhan realized he needed to figure out why that change happened. So he asked her what had brought her to the training room that day. She turned back and answered that she had obviously come to train. But inside, Yuhan was puzzled. In the original storyline, she was never supposed to show up at the training room on day one, so he couldn't help wondering why she was here at all. Then Nayeon put on a slightly sulky expression and asked if she really looked like the kind of student who would slack off on the first day. Her reaction caught him completely off guard. Because the sight of a puppy-faced girl pretending to act all sulky was unexpectedly cute, he almost agreed with her without thinking. There was no way he believed she came for real training. Anyone who understood the meta logic of this world knew that early training was basically skill grinding. Yet for a second, he found himself wondering if she actually meant it. Yuhan wasn't sure if she had really come all the way here just to train. There was no way she knew the meta logic that grinding skills was the real purpose of training. And if she did know, that would mean there was another unexpected variable. Before he could think too deeply about it, Nayeon spoke up. She admitted she hadn't planned on visiting the training hall on the first day either, but she changed her mind because of him. She explained that watching him help their classmates earlier made her want to improve herself as well. Listening to her, Yuhan came to a quiet realization. The variable was him. Because he was behaving differently from the original storyline, the girl named Nayeon was also responding in ways he had never expected. He hadn't imagined that someone like himself could shift the flow of events, and that the change was happening because she was far more sincere than he thought. Nayeon told him she wasn't sure what had happened with Yuri earlier, but she believed in him. Yuhan didn't quite understand why she trusted him so easily or why she had stepped in for him just because he showed a bit of kindness. Still, it wasn't a bad feeling. It was enough for him to think that maybe her sincerity was something he could rely on. He finally told her that the girl from earlier was his twin sister. There were a lot of positive comments about Nayeon in this chapter, and a few people were even saying she might become one of the main heroines. Reading through them, Nayeon felt that all the effort she'd put in had paid off. Even so, she couldn't help feeling annoyed. She was the one who smoothed things out and kept the small talk between Yuhan and Saiwa from turning awkward, yet the original novel had cut her right out of that scene. She let the irritation settle for a moment, then forced herself to focus on the positives. At least she had earned a good amount of meta points this time. In this chapter, she earned 250 meta points. She thought about putting them into her stats or skills right away, but doing that now would only make him suspicious. With Yuhan's insight, he would notice immediately if her numbers jumped for no clear reason. If she wanted to stay off his radar, she needed to wait for a moment that made sense, like when she leveled up and upgraded everything at once. That was the safest approach. And the timing happened to line up well, because their very first dungeon run was coming up soon. In Class F, one of the students proudly showed off the personal weapon he had just bought. The others crowded around him, impressed by how different it looked compared to the Academy's standard gear. Watching them, Yuhan wasn't surprised. Academy-issued weapons were only good for basic training inside the school. They were safe, sturdy, and simple, nothing more. Anyone who had ever touched a real weapon would notice the difference instantly. Even so, the Academy students would eventually end up on real battlefields where lives were on the line, so having a personalized weapon with bonuses and effects was basically essential. Most people usually preferred those upgraded weapons. That was why Yuhan felt a little annoyed. Right next to him, Nayeon was smiling brightly while saying that she actually liked the Academy's standard gear because it felt sturdy enough. He figured she didn't have the money to buy a personal weapon yet. While organizing his plans for the first hidden piece he'd be tackling, he walked over to Nayeon, who was busy checking her standard issue gear. He asked Nayeon if she wanted to check out the weapon shop with him, and she agreed right away, looking genuinely happy. On the other hand, Yuhan had a completely different plan in mind. He wanted to use this chance to put her in his debt and asked her to form a contract with him. Watching her brighten up over something she didn't fully understand yet stirred a faint sense of guilt in him. Back in Nayeon's perspective, she didn't think he needed to feel guilty at all. If anything, she planned to take full advantage of him just as much as he planned to use her. She might have been someone who had to be grateful even for basic, Academy-issued gear, but in Scamber's grand plans, there was no room for a teammate who only carried standard equipment. When they arrived at the weapon shop, Nayeon thanked Yuhan inwardly and tried her best to hide the excitement creeping onto her face. Inside, she couldn't help staring in awe at the sheer number of weapons on display. There were rows of blades, guns, staves, and gear she had only ever seen in illustrations. Yuhan caught the change in her expression and explained that Awakener gear tended to be pricey. Nayeon wasn't just surprised. She was stunned. These weren't even Meister grade, yet the prices were far higher than anything she imagined. She took a slow breath, steadied herself, and gave him a focused look. It was time to set her plan in motion. Nayeon let out a slow sigh and shifted into a gloomy look. Even with worries stacking up in her mind, she eased back into her sunny, determined act, doing her best to stay upbeat. She lifted her gaze to Yuhan with a firm expression and said she would work hard and save her own money. She added that she suddenly felt motivated, ending with a bright, hopeful smile. Yuhan told her she was admirable and reached out to pat her head. Nayeon stiffened inside, annoyed that he kept touching her so casually. Still, he went on to say that she might be able to get her own personal weapon sooner than she expected. Hearing that, Nayeon's face lit up with hope before she quickly softened it back into an innocent look. She agreed with him, saying that if she worked hard, maybe she really could get her own weapon sooner than expected. She already knew the truth. Yuhan would eventually buy her a high-grade, exclusive weapon for free, all because he wanted her as his dungeon partner. While they were busy comparing different weapons, Nayeon pointed out one that focused entirely on enhancing bullets. It was the kind of gear she usually preferred, and she lifted it for him to take a look. Yuhan took a careful look at the weapon she had picked out, then told her he would buy it for her. Nayeon's eyes went wide as she played up her confusion, asking why he would even do something like that and telling him not to waste his money on her. On the surface, she looked caught off guard, almost overwhelmed. Deep down, she was practically buzzing with excitement. A high-grade weapon for free was more than she ever expected, and she could barely hold back the smile threatening to escape. When she asked why he would buy something this expensive for her, he told her it wasn't free. Nayeon stiffened at his answer and put on a nervous look. She insisted she had nothing she could give him in return, then hesitantly asked if he was planning to take one of her organs or something. Her sudden question made Yuhan burst into laughter, and Nayeon couldn't even blame him. Even she knew her own guess sounded ridiculous. Once he calmed down, he told her it wasn't anything like that. He said he just had one request: he needed her skill. He added that he could explain the details after she agreed, but promised that whatever it was, it would never put her in danger. Nayeon felt this was the perfect moment to show the kind of values a true heroine should have. She looked straight at Yuhan, her expression serious, and asked if what he wanted from her involved hurting anyone. Yuhan shook his head and told her it was the opposite. It was something that would actually help people. After meeting his eyes, Nayeon paused for just a moment. Then she agreed to his request with steady confidence. Inside, she was already in love with the weapon he bought for her. It felt smooth and solid in her hands, and the fact that it was free made it even better. For a reward like this, she figured he could use her however he wanted. Yuhan began laying out the terms of the contract. The first rule was simple. If she ever entered a dungeon with him, she was not allowed to tell anyone outside his party about it. The second rule required her to keep his skills completely confidential. The third stated that any byproducts or extra materials earned from their dungeon runs would belong to him. At a glance, it looked like an ordinary contract, but it was actually a special document created through a skill. Most awakeners would hesitate the moment they noticed the faint gold shimmer running across the page. But Nayeon had no way of knowing what that meant. Nayeon understood that the contract carried penalties if she broke any of its terms. She was still a little wary of Yuhan, knowing he was trying to get something out of a naive, government-backed awakener like her. Even so, she signed without much hesitation. Getting a free weapon was more than enough reason for her. Yuhan watched Nayeon sign the contract, and a satisfied look crossed his face as he took the paper back. He told her that the dungeon they would be entering was a fixed-type dungeon located inside the academy. Nayeon asked if the academy really had its own dungeon. Yuhan explained that it was more accurate to say the dungeon was scheduled to appear today. Nayeon asked how he was even able to know something like that. Yuhan looked away and mumbled that he had a special skill. She knew his explanation didn't add up, but she went along with it and acted impressed, as if a commander having that kind of ability wasn't unusual at all. She asked if she was supposed to go with him to report the dungeon. Yuhan replied that he had no plans to report it and wanted to clear it quietly. Nayeon acted surprised and asked if it would be just the two of them. He tried to reassure her, saying it wouldn't be dangerous. Even so, she firmly reminded him that dungeons were always risky. He brushed off her concern with a vague answer, insisting it would be fine. Nayeon already knew why he sounded so confident. He was planning to clear the first hidden piece dungeon using a cheap trick, and his little operation even had a name, Hit and Run. She told herself to stay sharp and, in her mind, reminded herself to boost her stats before anything else. Her expression lit with fresh determination. Seeing that, Yuhan gave a satisfied nod. Nayeon was in a great mood. She had gotten a free weapon, picked up extra meta points, and all the comments about her were positive. Seeing how pleased she looked, Yuhan asked if it was really that good. In her mind, she answered that it obviously was. Even the points he could not see were climbing, so there was no reason for her not to feel happy. Nayeon was thinking that she wished every day could go as smoothly as today when the classroom door suddenly opened with a loud clatter behind them. Yuri stepped in and asked if Nayeon was there. Startled by the sudden appearance, Nayeon answered that she was. Yuri rushed over and asked if they could talk for a moment. Nayeon blinked in confusion, surprised that Yuri seemed to have business with her. At that moment, Yuhan asked Yuri what was going on. Yuri shot him a quick glare, as if annoyed he had spoken to her at all, and said she had nothing to say to him. She then grabbed Nayeon's arm and pulled her toward the hallway. Nayeon glanced back at Yuhan, almost blaming him for letting her get dragged away. As she followed Yuri out, she grew uneasy. Yuri looked like she was in a terrible mood. Once they stepped outside, the two of them stopped in a quiet spot where no one else was around. Nayeon carefully asked what Yuri wanted to talk about. Yuri hesitated for a moment, then said she knew it might make her seem strange, but she still needed to give Nayeon a warning. She glanced over her shoulder before speaking. Yuri went on, saying that Yuhan's brief moments of niceness meant nothing and that he had a history of pretending to be gentle while ruining people behind the scenes. The claim stunned Nayeon. She had never heard anything like that before. Yuri continued, insisting that Yuhan was the type who manipulated others and took pleasure in watching them fall apart. Everyone supposedly knew about it because they had all been on the receiving end at least once, which was why people avoided him. Her words made something click for Nayeon. Normally, people talked about reckless troublemakers with simple disgust, yet when she had sparred with the blue-haired student, his reaction toward Yuhan had been closer to hatred. She began to wonder if this version of Yuhan was part of a section of the story she had never read. As Yuri listed off the things Yuhan had done in the past, Nayeon realized he must have been a massive jerk back then. Yuri added that there had been only one exception, a single person he had gone out of his way to target. According to her, he slowly made that person depend on him, pushing them into a state where they listened only to him and acted exactly as he wanted. It sounded eerily similar to the way he was treating Nayeon now. In the end, Yuri said that the naive, trusting victim had cut ties with everyone around them until Yuhan was the only person left in their world. Eventually, they could not take it anymore and passed away. Yuri added that this was how she lost one of her closest friends, her voice carrying a quiet bitterness. Yuri clenched her fist so hard that it drew blood, then apologized as she admitted she had looked into Nayeon's background. She explained that even though Yuhan had been cast out by his own family, he was still dangerous enough that an isolated person could not handle him. She added that she sincerely hoped he had changed for real. Her voice trembled as she spoke. She did not want to see another person die because of him. Nayeon had never imagined there was a story like this behind everything. She remembered that in the original story, Yuhan had almost been expelled. Later, when he suddenly climbed his way up and became one of the Academy's well-known students, Yuri was the only one who refused to accept it. People online had called her frustrating for overreacting, but hearing this now, it finally made sense. Yuri might be right about him being an awful asshole, but Nayeon found herself stuck in a difficult spot. The real issue was that Yuhan had overheard their entire conversation. Yuri had always been strict about rules, so Nayeon used to think it was weird that she pushed so hard to get him kicked out. She never expected there would be a reason like this behind it. If that was their past, then Nayeon showing up in his life again must have touched a sensitive spot, which explained why Yuri kept such a close eye on her. She guessed Yuri had seen her getting too friendly with Yuhan and spent the whole night stressed before finally coming to warn her. The idea made Nayeon feel a little sorry for her. She wished she could tell Yuri the truth, that the Yuhan she used to know was gone. But the situation wasn't that simple. She couldn't just walk away from him the way Yuri wished. Nayeon reminded her that since Yuri had looked into her background, she should already know this. She had met countless people who were desperate enough to risk everything, even their lives, for what they wanted. She said she recognized that look in Yuri's eyes the moment she saw it. She had seen that same look in people who were ready to risk everything, which was why she couldn't believe Yuri was lying. But she also said that if everything she had seen from Yuhan was nothing but an act, it would be painful to face. She wanted to believe he wasn't someone who hurt others anymore. So Nayeon asked if, this time, Yuri could be the one to look out for her. If Yuhan really hadn't changed and tried to use her or hurt her, she wanted Yuri to step in and stop him. But if he truly had changed, Nayeon suggested that the two of them go and apologize to him together. She held Yuri's hand tightly as she said it, her expression bright and sincere. For Nayeon, this was the only thing she could offer to the strong-willed yet warm-hearted girl who had rushed over because she couldn't stand seeing anyone get hurt anymore. After hearing Nayeon's words, Yuri broke into tears, asking how she could agree to something like that with so much confidence. She cried that Nayeon trusted people too easily and shouldn't put her faith in others so quickly. Nayeon just smiled, saying she was thankful that someone as strong and sharp as Yuri cared about her. And strangely, she felt relieved that Yuhan had taken over this body. If Yuri was right about his past, then at least he would never hurt anyone again. Yuri agreed and told Nayeon she could rely on her, assuring her she would protect her this time. She added that she had no intention of making the same mistake twice. The two of them exchanged numbers, and Yuri asked if they could start having lunch together the next day. The suggestion caught Nayeon off guard, but she agreed. Meanwhile, someone watching from a distance stepped out of the shadows, observing them with clear interest.